All right, let's take a look at a few sample projects and just talk a little bit about how you might approach solving this project. Let's just quickly take a look at, say, Beauty Killed the Beast. And the idea, of course, is to find typefaces that match the feeling of the word or words that are in that message. And so, beauty is a beauty word, right? It's pretty. It's got, it's got a lot of emotional, oh, beautiful kind of feeling, right? And killed, of course, is a very violent word and in some ways very contrasty to the idea of beauty, right? So we have two very strongly contrasting typefaces. And of course, the beast is, it's a gnarly thing. And so those three concepts have been, I think well illustrated with these three very different typefaces. And so looking at the same phrase in a different way, the idea is still sort of the same, right? Beauty is still a very pretty typeface. Killed, of course, is now very dominant and very solid. And then the beast still has a kind of a gnarly look to it, right? So, again, exploring things like overlap, scale, the idea of emphasis versus de-emphasis, the being small and being a conjunction, or is being part of the word beast, the beast, overlap, color. So these are all things that are going on in these compositions. And then we have, Gone with the Wind, which looks very similar, right, to these other two, but an entirely different message. Now, is it working? Gone with the Wind. This, is this typeface for Gone? Is that really? Does that feel right with the concept of going with the wind, which is rather a light kind of concept? And so, moving on, we could look at celebrating the elegance, right? Now, what we're dealing with here is, again, some very quiet, very elegant typefaces, right? And even the word celebrate in a sans serif, almost a decorative typeface, the word elegance in a much more scripty, handwritten kind of typeface, an initial cap, right? And this is always a neat thing you can try, where one letter form becomes much larger than all the others, and it creates a sense of dominance, and it anchors the whole design down. And we're dealing again here a little bit with this thing which is known as an embellishment. And you have to ask yourself, if you're going to add something, is it going to really help the design, or is it they're just as eye candy? So you really want to evaluate that. My suggestion is to stay away from embellishments unless they really, really do help the message become a little more clear or a little more impactful or a little more emotional. But if it's just there and it's just kind of hanging out and you could delete it and it wouldn't make any difference, then I would say don't incorporate them. But in general, I'd say don't incorporate them as a rule. All right. So then as we move down, got this phrase cold as ice, right? And so there's typefaces that look like ice. They look cold. The color, the reflection makes it look like it might be reflecting in ice or in water. So the gradient, of course, also has that sense of, adding a little bit of depth to the whole design. So all of these things are possibilities in terms of that phrase. And then we can look at it again in a completely different way. And even though the typefaces don't feel icy or they don't feel snowy or whatever, they still feel cold, right? The type quality, the letter, the color of the typefaces. This is a nice example of overlap and of emphasis and de-emphasis, where the word cold is obviously the most dominant. Ice has a more illustrative kind of decorative typeface to it. It overlaps a little bit, which creates some interest. And then the word as, which is obviously the least important or de-emphasized word, has become very small, and it's placed kind of neatly within a little negative space in the configuration of those words. Another example of the same phrase with a completely different solution. And again, so this really shows that there's a lot of different ways that you can solve any one of these problems. Although it does look like the word ice is the same typeface as this one, although this one's all in uppercase and this one's in upper lowercase. But still, the feeling is different yet similar, and we can still see here as the little word "as" has been de-emphasized and positioned within a negative space, then that all the letters and all the words have been overlapped creates a very solid sense of continuity and depth. So that's kind of a neat experiment there. Here is a situation where we have a word repeated as a graphic element in the background. And so this is fine if it works. And in this case, it does, even though the typeface is different. It kind of creates a frame and a perimeter that these other words can play within. In this case here, it looks like these two typefaces are the same, but of a different weight, which is a cool thing. The gradient and the color in the texture that's been placed in these is very effective. The initial cap for the O and the T are also effective elements. The overlap between these elements and how closely they're positioned is also very effective. So how you configure these designs is also a very important part of your compositional structure. The love child. And this is a phrase I probably should get rid of. I don't know why I don't, because I've had a couple of good ones. I don't love this design, but I think it's a decent design for what we're trying to do. Here's a little embellishment. But because it's an anomaly, because it's red and it's small and it's kind of stuck in the middle of the O, it creates a sort of a sense of interest. So that is a possibility, but again, tread lightly there. And military intelligence. I get a lot of the blood in military intelligence, and so, it's kind of an expected sort of solution. And then I think there's a question mark in the background here as the blood drains into the question mark, which there wasn't really a question mark in the phrase, but I'm okay with, if you want to add an embellishment like that, I'm okay with that. It's just, keep it under control. Here's the same situation, except now intelligence is bleeding and military was bleeding here. So I'm not sure why military intelligence always has to have blood in it, but it is what it is. But anyway, noticing how the tight configuration of the words where they set on top of one another is a very effective way of handling things when they're all uppercase. I've had this phrase for a lot longer than the orange was the new black. But I still like the phrase the new black, so I leave it in anyways. But this was a neat configuration, the using the Bauhaus black letter forms, and then the box of the black and the text inside of that is a neat effect. And this is something you might consider as a graphic enhancement to the design that doesn't detract from the actual message or the typography in and of itself. So that's a kind of a neat idea you might think of. Another, search and destroy. And again, finding, radical typefaces on dafont.com is not a difficult thing. There's all kinds of edgy, kind of punky grunge type typefaces, so there's plenty of opportunities there. This is a nice example though of a full overlap, and then using the color to help that overlap work. And of course the "and" being again minimized or de-emphasized really helps the overall design on this one. Here's an example where it's not working so well, and I put this in for a reason. And the reason is that the word "seeing," right? It's using a standard text-based typeface, which would be something like Times New Roman or Baskerville or Bookman or something like that, or Cooper. And these typefaces tend not to be very effective at headlines or at display because they're not really designed to do that. They're designed to be reading typefaces for body text. So it tends to fail when they're placed in a position where they have to do a job where they weren't really designed to be doing that job. So be careful of picking standardized typefaces for this project. Try and explore the possibilities that are out there and look at the display typefaces or the decorative typefaces and try and, get a more of an emotional impact on that. The word believing, however, it's a neat typeface, but again, the whole conjunction of the elements is just kind of not working, even though there was an effort to kind of tuck the conjunction inside of the negative space. It just isn't really working very well. So again, you need to be aware of what you're getting when you create a design, and you have to analyze in your own mind, is this really working or not? So that's why I put that one in there. There's a few spice of lives in here that I wanted to put in just because there's some differences in the contrast. And if you choose to add graphic elements, again, they need to add some impact. And in this case, it seems to work because of the colors that they used in the outline and in the fill of those letter forms, and so it kind of works in this case. But again, you want to be careful. It's not something you want to overdo. This is very nice. It's a very effective use of two very strong contrasting typefaces that are then overlapped or underlapped, as the case may be. Maybe too much color, like the word of, probably didn't need to be green. It could have been a gray color and it would have been fine. Careful of drop shadows. They're cool, they can be fun, but they're something that you want to just use carefully, all right? Here's another example of where the word life has been really solidly identified by a very heavy, bold, seriously heavy typeface, and then the letter forms are stacked on top of it. So it's kind of a neat solution. This is also an example of picking. Now the word spice, the alphabet, the typeface for spice and of life are the same. It's just that this is the lowercase and this is the uppercase. But the typeface for spice and the typeface for life are also the same. And so you can just flip the typefaces back and forth to see what happens between them. Sometimes the message itself has enough impact as an emotional concept that swapping the typefaces can be effective. So be aware of that. It's a nice, clean, simple, elegant design. And the word this, the conjunction is tucked into a nice negative space. There's a nice sense of alignment between the M, the T, and the P, so that sort of structurally connects everything together. Here's a little embellishment, which I'm okay with, because the little ear, which is that little hook that's on the end of the G, is now the little leaf form, and it's in the word spring, and so it kind of works. It's kind of cute in that way. Here's one where it needs work still, right? And again, I put this in to show what might start happening and where it needs to go. So here, found two typefaces that might work, but they're kind of incongruous yet, right? Because this has some odd embellishments, and then the young is a very, very loose script typeface, and then the word the and is are your standard straightforward Times New Roman. So it's a good start, but it needs a lot of work. So just be aware as you start to configure your designs that you have, that you can't end it till it's working. And in this case, it still needs a lot of work. The could be closer. Probably in a sans serif font would be better. This is probably in the same typeface as the, and possibly tucked in a little bit tighter. Young could be larger with possibly some overlap on the word night, because these letters are so strong and powerful that the word young could be tucked up above that or over it or larger. So again, there's some opportunities that were missed on this design. Here's a what are you thinking? And here I want to just talk a little bit about the exclamation points, ampersands, question marks. These are all opportunities for graphic enhancements. So you can take a question mark or an exclamation point and make it really big and make it really graphic, and then suddenly it turns into a graphical element that is kind of fun. Color in this one probably needs some work, but I just wanted to show that to you for that particular reason. Also, for working things on an angle, don't be afraid to get a little bit angular with some of these designs. Be careful, but be aware that it's possible. Here's two versions of the what is art that I wanted to finish with, and this one is, You could say, yeah, that one's good and it's good enough and it does its job. And, it's kind of playing around with the idea of the emphasis, right? Because we're not exactly positive which word is the most dominant. And in this phrase, what is art, any one of those words could be dominant. So it's kind of having a good time playing with that idea of that ambiguity of which is the most important word. So that's a fun thing to explore. But by embellishing it a little bit with a couple of typefaces, it suddenly becomes much more impactful. So this is just a good example of, okay, could have done the job a little bit better because it was pushed a little further. Question mark still has a feeling of being a little isolated. It probably could have been integrated, possibly being a little bit larger and kind of overlapped under the T or something like that, just to help it be part of the design. As it is, it feels like it's a little bit of an afterthought, but still, it's a good effort. So those are some things that you might think about as you start this project. Alrighty, so that's some inspiration for you.